The night I raised my hand at a black SUV, I thought I was helping a stranger. I had no idea I was stepping into the one world nobody in this city ever walked away from unchanged. It was a little after 11, the kind of late that made downtown feel hollowed out, all glass and rain and red taillights smearing across wet pavement like the city was too tired to keep its mascara from running. My shift at the diner had ended 20 minutes earlier, and my feet hurt so badly I could feel every inch of the 6 blocks between the bus stop and my apartment. My sneakers were soaked through. My blue uniform clung to my arms. The paper bag holding my fries had turned soft at the bottom from the rain, and I remember thinking that if I made it home without dropping dinner or crying, I could call that a win. Then I saw the SUV. It was parked at the curb under a dead street lamp, long and black and polished enough to catch every passing streak of neon. The windows were tinted, but not enough to hide the shape pressed faintly against the back passenger glass. A hand. Small. Still. Then it moved. Just once. I stopped walking. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a kid waiting on a parent. Maybe it was none of my business. But something about the way that hand stayed there, flat against the window, made the air feel wrong. My mother used to work overnight admissions at a county hospital, and when I was younger, she taught me a few quiet signals people used when they were scared and didn't want to say it out loud. Most people forget that fear gets quiet before it gets loud. I stood there in the rain, heart tapping harder than it should have, and lifted my hand slowly. 2 fingers. Palm tilted. A silent question. Are you okay? For 1 second, nothing happened. The city kept moving around me. Tires hissed over puddles. Somewhere down the block, a siren wailed and faded. Then the rear door of the SUV opened. Not the back. The front. A man stepped out, and the whole street seemed to pull tight. He was tall in the way some men are tall, without trying, broad shoulders under a charcoal coat, dark hair rain-specked at the edges, one hand bare while the other adjusted the cuff of a black glove like he had all the time in the world. He did not look surprised to see me. He looked like the kind of man surprise happened around. Not to. I should have walked away right then. I know that now. But fear has a strange way of pinning your feet to the ground when your instincts finally catch up to your mistakes. He crossed the sidewalk with slow, measured steps until he stopped a few feet from me. Close enough for me to notice the silver watch at his wrist. Close enough to hear how calm his breathing was. Close enough to realize that every other man near the SUV was watching him before they watched me. What was that signal for? He asked. His voice was low, steady, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. I swallowed. I thought someone in the back seat might need help. One of the men by the SUV shifted instantly, like I had said the wrong thing in the wrong church. Another reached for the rear door, and for a second I saw her more clearly. A little girl, maybe 8 or 9, wrapped in a cream coat, her cheeks wet with tears but her body unharmed, sitting beside an older woman who was trying to soothe her. Relief hit me so fast my knees almost weakened. I had been wrong. Terribly, embarrassingly wrong. She's my niece, the man said. She had a panic episode. I should have apologized and left. Instead, because apparently my survival instincts had clocked out before I had, I said. Then maybe somebody should have told her she was safe. Silence. One of the men near the car took a step toward me, but the man in front of me lifted one finger, and that was enough. No one moved after that. Rain dripped from my hair into my eyes. I blinked it away and finally looked at him the way this city had taught everyone not to. That was when I knew. I had seen his face before, never this close. Always in glimpses, attached to whispers and headlines that never said much, but somehow said enough. Roman DeLuca. The name people lowered their voices to say. The kind of man mothers warned their daughters about without ever explaining why. My stomach dropped so hard it felt physical. He studied me for another long second, not like a stranger, not even like a threat. Like a question he hadn't expected. You don't know when to look away, do you? He asked. I wanted to say I usually did. I wanted to say I had no interest in his world, his car, his name, his silence. But the truth was standing right there between us, rain-soaked and shivering. Not when someone looks afraid, I said. Something changed in his face then. Not softness. Nothing that simple. But something sharpened, and at the same time, something else gave way. A black sedan turned onto the street too slowly. One of his men glanced toward it. Another touched his earpiece. The air changed again, colder now, tighter. Roman never looked away from me. Get in the car, Claire, he said. I froze. I never told you my name. His gaze dropped briefly to the plastic diner tag still pinned crooked to my chest, then lifted back to mine. That's exactly why you should be worried. The first thing I noticed when I slid into the back seat was the warmth. It wrapped around me so suddenly that my skin almost hurt from it, like my body had forgotten what comfort felt like after standing in the rain. The leather was dark and smooth beneath my hands. The windows were dim enough to turn the city outside into a blur of red, white, and gold. Somewhere up front, a soft instrumental track played low through the speakers, too elegant for a night that had already gone this wrong. I should have felt safer inside a locked car than on an empty sidewalk after 11. I did not. Roman DeLuca got in beside me a second later, and that changed the shape of the air all over again. He closed the door with one quiet motion, and the sound cut me off from the street completely. His driver pulled away from the curb without anyone needing to be told. That was what unsettled me most. No wasted words. No confusion. His world moved as if everyone in it already knew the next 5 steps before they happened. Mine barely knew what to do with the next 5 seconds. I held my wet paper bag in both hands like it was going to save me. Roman glanced at it once, then at my shoes, then at the puddle gathering beneath my feet on the floor mat. You are shaking, he said. I am cold, I answered. You are scared. That too. He gave the smallest nod, as if honesty was something he respected more than manners. For a few blocks, neither of us spoke. The city drifted by outside in broken reflections. Closed storefronts, a blinking pharmacy sign, a gas station glowing on the corner like the last awake thing in the neighborhood. I kept telling myself to breathe slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The same way I did before exams, before job interviews, before opening bills I already knew I could not pay on time. But it was difficult to calm down with Roman sitting inches away, one arm resting along the seat, his expression unreadable, his silence somehow louder than most people shouting. Where are we going? I finally asked. Somewhere quiet. That is not an answer. It is the only one you need right now. I turned to him then, fully, because fear can make you brave in stupid ways. You do not get to decide what I need. His eyes shifted to mine. Calm. Direct. Too steady. Actually, he said, tonight I do. My heart stumbled against my ribs. I hated that part of me wanted to look away. I hated even more that part of me did not. I made a mistake, I said. I thought your niece was in danger. I was wrong. So let me go home. Roman looked out the window for a moment before answering. The passing lights sharpened the angles of his face, then softened them again. You made 2 mistakes, he said. The first was assuming you understood what you saw. The second was letting other people see you see it. I frowned. What is that supposed to mean? He did not answer immediately. Up front, the man in the passenger seat murmured something into his phone, too low for me to catch. The driver took an unexpected turn, veering away from my neighborhood. I sat forward. That is not the way to Maple Street. I know, Roman said. Then tell him to turn around. No one word. No rise in his voice. No threat in it. Just a flat certainty that landed heavier than anger ever could. I looked toward the front seat. Stop. The car. Neither man reacted. It was like I had spoken into a room full of statues. They will not listen to you, Roman said. Why? I snapped. Because they work for you? Because they work for me. I stared at him, then laughed once, sharp and humorless, because I did not know what else to do. That is supposed to make me feel better? No, he said. It is supposed to make you understand the situation. The car slowed at a light. Outside, a couple under an umbrella hurried past a bakery that had already locked its doors. Everything out there looked ordinary. Safe. A whole world still operating by normal rules while I sat inside this one, trying not to panic in a heated leather seat next to the man half the city feared by reputation alone. I reached into my pocket for my phone. Before I could unlock it, Roman held out his hand. Give it to me. Absolutely not. Claire. The way he said my name should not have mattered. It did. It was not rough. It was not soft either. It was precise, like he had already decided I belonged inside this moment and was adjusting the rest of the night around that fact. I curled my fingers tighter around my phone. I am not giving you my phone. His gaze dropped to my hand, then returned to my face. In the last 3 minutes, 2 cars have stayed with us through 4 turns. 1 motorcycle has doubled back twice. And someone on the sidewalk took your picture before you got into my vehicle. All the blood seemed to leave my body at once. What? You were noticed, he said. That means you are no longer a stranger standing in the rain. You are a face connected to me. I could hear my pulse in my ears now. Connected how? Roman leaned slightly closer, not enough to corner me, just enough to make sure I heard him clearly. Connected in a way that can get you followed, questioned, or used by people who assume proximity means importance. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. I am not important. His eyes held mine for one long second. That is not how they will see it. I looked down at my phone, then back at the window, where a pair of headlights stayed 2 cars behind us through the green light. My apartment suddenly felt very far away. My little kitchen, my thrift store lamp, the blanket folded at the end of my bed, all of it fragile now, as if a single glance in the wrong direction had cracked the life I knew without making a sound. So what happens now? I whispered. Roman extended his hand again, patient this time, almost formal. Now, he said, you let me keep you alive long enough to explain the rest. My fingers tightened around my phone for one last second before I placed it in Roman DeLuca's hand. It felt less like giving up a device and more like surrendering proof that the rest of my life had existed only an hour earlier. He turned it over once, screen dark against his palm, then passed it to the man in the front seat without even looking away from me. It will be returned, he said. When? I asked. When it stops being dangerous. I almost laughed again, but there was nothing left in me that sounded like humor. The car kept moving, smooth and steady, cutting through rain-slick streets that grew quieter the farther we went. Downtown thinned into blocks of shuttered storefronts, old brick buildings, and polished towers with only a few lights still on in the upper floors. I watched familiar roads disappear behind us and tried to memorize turns I did not understand, but panic is terrible at directions. Every block looked colder than the last. Every reflection in the glass made me feel smaller. You could be lying, I said. Roman rested one hand near the edge of the seat, the silver watch at his wrist catching a flash of passing streetlight. About which part? All of it. That would be inefficient. That is not exactly comforting. It is honest. I hated how much that answer sounded like him. Sharp, controlled, stripped of anything extra. The kind of truth that did not care whether it made you feel better. The car turned beneath a stone archway and eased through a wrought iron gate that was already opening before we reached it. Beyond it sat a building that looked less like a house and more like something the city had decided to protect out of respect. It was all pale limestone, tall windows, black iron balconies, and warm lights spilling from the first floor like it. Had nothing to fear from the dark outside. A fountain stood silent in the center of the circular drive, rainwater collecting in its basin. 2 men under the front awning straightened as we approached. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. Roman stepped out first, and the whole space seemed to recalibrate around him. One of the men opened my door. I did not move right away. What is this place? I asked. Roman looked back at me over one shoulder. Safe. That word keeps meaning whatever you want it to mean. He held my gaze for a beat, rain tapping softly against the roof above us. Tonight, that is still better than the alternatives. I got out because the driver had already taken my phone, because the gate behind us had closed, because I did not know who might have seen my face, and because there are moments in life when the only control left is choosing which fear you walk toward. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar, coffee, and clean linen. The entry hall was wider than my entire apartment, all cream-colored walls, dark wood floors, and a chandelier that cast honey-colored light over everything it touched. My wet sneakers left small marks on the polished floor, and I felt suddenly, painfully out of place. 20 years old, diner uniform, drugstore mascara probably halfway down my face. Standing in a mansion at midnight with a man whose name made the city lower its voice. A woman in a navy dress appeared from the hallway to the left. She looked to be in her 40s, elegant and composed, the kind of person who could probably fix a crisis by folding a towel the right way. Miss Bennett, Roman said, and I turned sharply because hearing my name in this house sounded stranger than hearing it in the car. This is Elena. She will take care of what you need. Elena offered me a small, kind smile, the first softness I had seen since this night began. You must be freezing, she said. We have dry clothes ready upstairs. Ready? I repeated. Roman loosened the buttons at his cuff with slow precision. Prepared, he corrected. My staff plans ahead. Your staff plans ahead for random girls pulled off sidewalks? The room went quiet. Not offended. Just still. Roman looked at me with that same unreadable calm, as if he was deciding how much truth I could handle at once. No, he said. For variables. I should have been terrified by that answer. Maybe I was. But beneath the fear was something else now. Something more dangerous because it did not come with alarms. Curiosity. The kind that creeps in when a person keeps failing to match the monster you expected. Am I a variable? I asked. Tonight, he said. You are the reason my security team is not sleeping. Elena stepped closer, gentle but efficient. Come with me, Miss Bennett. I hesitated. I am not staying here. Roman removed his coat and handed it to one of the men near the door. You are staying until I know exactly who saw you, who followed us, and whether your apartment is still safe. And if I say no? He looked at me then with the first hint of something warmer than control, though not by much. Not warmth exactly. Recognition, maybe, as if he had expected me to ask. Then you still stay, he said quietly. But you make it harder on yourself. Elena touched my arm lightly, enough to guide, not enough to force. I let her lead me toward the staircase, but halfway there I stopped and turned back. Roman had already stepped into the study off the main hall, one hand braced on the doorframe, while two men spoke to him in low, urgent voices. Even from across the room, he carried the same impossible stillness, the same sense that everyone else was rushing around the edges of a storm that had already chosen its center. Maybe he felt me looking, because his eyes lifted and found mine immediately. Claire, he said. Just my name. Nothing else. But somehow it held the weight of a warning and a promise at the same time. Do not go near the windows tonight. Elena led me upstairs through a corridor, so quiet I could hear the soft brush of my damp sleeves against my arms. The house was warm in that careful, expensive way that never felt stuffy, only steady, as if even the temperature had been trained to behave. Gold light fell across dark runner rugs and framed oil paintings I did not know enough to recognize, and every few feet there was another vase, another polished table, another sign that the people who lived here had never once worried about. Choosing between groceries and rent, I followed her in silence, still feeling the weight of Roman's last words like they had settled on the back of my neck. Do not go near the windows tonight. Not please. Not for your own peace of mind. Just a quiet instruction delivered as if danger were already outside, patient and waiting. Elena opened a door at the end of the hall and stepped aside for me to enter. The room inside was larger than my apartment bedroom and living room put together. There was a bed dressed in ivory linen, a fireplace with a low marble mantel, two armchairs near an unlit hearth, and a bathroom through an archway with enough light pouring from it to make the stone floor glow. Folded clothes had been laid neatly at the end of the bed. Cream sweater, soft gray pants, a pair of slippers that looked like clouds. On the dresser sat a glass of water and a small plate with cut fruit like someone had expected I might forget to eat while panicking. How do you already know my size? I asked before I could stop myself. Elena gave a small, diplomatic smile. I guessed. That was a very confident guess. This house values preparation. The answer was gentle, but it sounded rehearsed, polished at the edges in a way that told me everyone under this roof knew exactly how much to say and when to stop. She moved toward the bathroom and turned on the shower. Steam rose almost immediately, curling into the room. You should warm up, she said. I will have your clothes dried and your shoes replaced by morning. Replaced? Those cannot be comfortable anymore. I looked down at my battered sneakers, the soles stained from diner grease and city rain, and suddenly wanted to cry for reasons that had nothing to do with shoes. I was too tired, too cold, too alert all at once. Everything tonight had happened too fast for my emotions to catch up properly, so they had just stacked on top of each other inside me like boxes ready to fall. Elena must have seen something in my face, because her voice softened. Miss Bennett, no one in this house intends to harm you. That is not the same thing as telling me I am free to leave. Her hands stilled on the edge of a folded towel. For the first time, she did not answer immediately. No, she said at last. It is not. She left a few minutes later, and the silence that followed felt deeper than any silence I had ever known. Not empty, just sealed, like the walls themselves were listening. I showered longer than I meant to, standing under hot water until feeling returned to my fingers and the chill finally loosened its grip from my bones. I washed diner coffee and rainwater from my skin and tried not to think about how impossible it was that only a few hours earlier I had been refilling ketchup bottles and calculating whether I could stretch my tips until Friday. When I came out, the room smelled faintly of lavender from the soap and cedar from the firewood stacked neatly beside the hearth. I dressed in clothes that fit a little too well for comfort and sat on the edge of the bed with the towel still in my hands, listening. At first there was nothing, then distant footsteps, a door opening somewhere downstairs, muffled voices, a pause, another door. I stood before I could talk myself out of it and crossed the room on bare feet, the rug soft beneath them. Roman had told me not to go near the windows, so naturally that was exactly where my eyes went. Heavy curtains framed tall glass doors that opened onto a narrow balcony. I did not touch them. I only stood a few feet away, staring at the line where fabric met floor, as if I might somehow see through his warning without disobeying it. What did he think was out there? Reporters, enemies, strangers with cameras, people who tracked faces the way normal people tracked weather. My heart started beating harder again. I turned away from the window and reached automatically for my phone before remembering it was gone. The absence of it landed in me with fresh force. No messages, no maps, no clock, no way to call my landlord, my manager, or the one friend who still answered after midnight. Just me in a borrowed sweater in a locked room in Roman DeLuca's house, trying to make sense of why he had looked at me like I was both a problem and something he had already decided to protect. A soft knock came at the door. I froze. "Come in," I said, though my voice barely cooperated. The door opened, and a little girl stood there in pale pajamas, one hand curled around the frame, her dark hair braided loosely over one shoulder. The same child from the SUV, Roman's niece. She looked at me with wide, serious eyes that felt far too old for her age. "You are the girl from the rain," she said. I nodded slowly. "And you are the girl from the window." She stepped inside without waiting to be invited, as if children in houses like this never had to ask permission for ordinary things. "Uncle Roman said I should not bother you," she whispered, "but I wanted to say thank you." I stared at her. For what? Her small fingers tightened on the doorframe. For seeing me. And before I could answer, before I could even decide what that meant, a man's voice sounded sharply somewhere down the hall, followed by fast footsteps and the sudden, unmistakable click of a lock turning from the outside. The click at the door landed inside my chest harder than it should have. Not because it was loud. It was not. It was precise, controlled, the kind of sound that belonged in a house where nothing happened by accident. The little girl looked back toward the hallway, then up at me, and for the first time since I had seen her in the SUV, she looked exactly her age. Small. Uncertain. "It is only because of me," she said softly. "When I get scared, they lock doors." I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. "They lock your door too?" She nodded once. "Sometimes. Uncle Roman says it is so nothing bad can come in. But it also means nothing can go out." There was no drama in the way she said it. No complaint. Just the quiet repetition of a rule she had learned too young. I moved closer and crouched in front of her, so we were eye level. "What is your name?" "Sophia." "I am Claire." "I know." That almost made me smile. Almost. The hallway outside had gone quiet again, but not the comfortable kind. It felt like the house was listening. Sophia stepped farther into the room, the hem of her pajama pants brushing the carpet, and looked at the tray on the dresser. "You did not eat." "The fruit." I was busy being confused. She considered that very seriously. "That makes sense." I sat beside her on the edge of the bed, and for a minute neither of us spoke. Rain whispered faintly against the windows beyond the curtains. Somewhere deeper in the house, a door opened and closed. I kept thinking about what she had said. Nothing can go out. A child should not know how to say something that's sad that clearly. "Why did you thank me?" I asked. "Before." Sophia traced one finger across the quilt beside her. "Because everyone in the car was looking at Uncle Roman. They always look at him first." "You looked at me." The room seemed to still around that sentence. It was such a simple thing. And somehow it explained everything that had felt strange since the sidewalk. Roman had noticed because I had done the one thing people in his world apparently never did. I had looked past power and seen the frightened person beside it. Sophia glanced toward the door again. "He was worried after I saw the cameras." "What cameras?" I asked. She frowned lightly, like she was trying to remember how much grown-ups allowed children to say. "The ones on the screens downstairs." The men were pointing at your face. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the rain. Did your uncle say who those men were? She shook her head. He does not tell me scary things. He just makes them go away. There it was again, that strange split inside this house. Comfort wrapped around fear. Silk over steel. A child in soft pajamas talking about danger like whether adults could handle for her. I opened my mouth to ask another question when a knock sounded at the door, this time slower, more deliberate. Sophia straightened instantly. The lock turned. The door opened, and Elena stepped in first, her expression calm but tighter than before. Roman was behind her. He had removed his suit jacket and rolled his sleeves once at the forearms, but somehow he looked even more formal without it, as if command sat closer to his skin than fabric ever could. His eyes moved from Sophia to me, then to the untouched tray, the damp towel draped over the chair, the few feet between me and the window. He noticed everything. Sophia, he said. Not sharp, not cold, just enough. She slid off the bed at once. I only wanted to say thank you, she murmured. Roman's gaze softened by a fraction when he looked at her. And now you will let Miss Bennet rest. Sophia nodded and crossed the room to him. As she passed, her small hand brushed his for a second. He closed his fingers around hers briefly, and the gesture was so quiet, so practiced, that it told me more about him than any rumor ever could. He waited until Elena led Sophia out before stepping inside and closing the door behind them. Suddenly the room felt smaller, though he had barely moved. Are you all right? He asked. I stared at him. That is your question? His expression did not change. It is the one that matters first. Really? I stood up, anger finally rising through the exhaustion like heat through cold hands. Because from where I am standing, the thing that matters first is why a child just told me people were pointing at my face on security screens while your staff locked me in a room. His jaw shifted once, the only sign that my words had landed. You were not locked in to trap you, he said. You were locked in to contain movement on this floor while my team checked the perimeter. That does not sound better. It is more accurate. I gave a tired, incredulous laugh. Do you always talk like every sentence is a contract? Only when people's safety depends on precision. He stepped closer then, not enough to crowd me, but enough that I could see the rain still caught at the edge of his dark hair, enough to notice that his eyes were not black like I had first thought, only very dark brown and very steady. Claire, he said, quieter now. Someone outside this house obtained your image within minutes of you standing beside my car. I do not yet know if that was surveillance, coincidence, or opportunity. Until I know, every unlocked door becomes a risk. I folded my arms over the borrowed sweater, more to hold myself together than to look defiant. Then tell me the truth for once. Am I in danger because I saw your niece, or because someone thinks I matter to you? He looked at me for a long moment, and in that silence I had the strange, impossible feeling that the answer mattered to him too. At the moment, he said at last, voice low enough to feel like it belonged only to the room between us. Those are becoming the same problem. Roman's answer stayed in the air after he said it, low and calm, and somehow heavier than if he had raised his voice. Those are becoming the same problem. I stood there in a borrowed sweater with damp hair cooling against my neck, trying to decide which part unsettled me more. The idea that I might be in danger because of him, or the possibility that somewhere in the space of a single night, I had become important enough to be noticed inside his world. I do not like being talked about like a situation, I said quietly. Roman did not blink. That makes two of us. At least you still have choices. A shadow crossed his face then, brief but real. Not anger. Something older. More tired. He looked toward the door for half a second, as if making sure no one would interrupt, then turned back to me. You think choice disappears only when someone takes your keys or locks a door, he said. Sometimes it disappears the moment somebody learns your name. The room went still around us. Rain touched the windows in soft, uneven taps. Downstairs, somewhere far below, I heard the faint echo of movement and the hush of voices, proof that the rest of the house was still awake and working around whatever storm had followed me here. Roman walked to the dresser and picked up the glass of water Elena had left. He handed it to me without a word. I took it because my throat was dry and because refusing would have felt childish, even though some stubborn part of me wanted to refuse everything he offered on principle. The water was cold, clean, grounding. Did someone follow me before tonight? I asked. Not that we saw. So this is because I stood near your car for 30 seconds. 38, he said. I stared at him. You counted. I count everything. It should not have surprised me, but it did. Something about that detail made him feel even more dangerous, not because it was cruel, but because it was disciplined. A man who counted seconds. A man who noticed untouched fruit and wet footprints and whether I had gone too close to the curtains. A man who could probably walk into a room and tell which person was lying before they even opened their mouth. That is exhausting, I muttered. It is useful. For you, maybe. For everyone who depends on me. He said it simply, with no need to impress, and that was exactly what made the words land. I thought of Sophia in the hallway, her small hand in his for 1 second before she left. I thought of the men downstairs turning toward him before they moved. I thought of how the whole house seemed to tighten and loosen based on the angle of his voice. Power looked different up close. Less like noise. More like gravity. She is afraid of the cameras, I said. Roman's gaze shifted, the smallest change, but I saw it. Sophia notices more than people think children should. She notices because she has to. He did not argue. That silence told me enough. She thanked me for seeing her. I went on, softer now. That is not something a child says unless she is used to being overlooked. Roman lowered his eyes for a moment, then lifted them back to mine. In my world, people spend too much time seeing titles and too little time seeing people. And you know that because you are one of the titles. His mouth almost curved. Not a smile. More like the memory of one. Something like that. I should have stepped back then. I should have remembered who he was and what this house meant and how far from normal my life had drifted in a matter of hours. Instead, I asked the question that had been sitting inside me since the car. Why did you bring me here yourself? Roman's expression became unreadable again. Because sending you with someone else would have created distance I could not afford. Distance from what? From the truth. Which is, he took a slow breath, and for the first time since I had met him, he seemed to choose his words with something that looked almost like reluctance. My enemies are patient, he said. They study patterns. They look for weakness where there should be none. If they saw you near me and then saw I did nothing, they would assume you are unimportant and move on. But if they saw me bring you here, they will assume the opposite. I stared at him, the shape of it unfolding piece by piece in my chest. Then bringing me here made it worse. Yes. He said it without hesitation, an honesty that sharp was almost cruel. I set the glass down too quickly on the dresser. So why would you do that? Roman stepped closer, close enough that I could smell cedar and rain and the faint clean scent of his soap, close enough that the room seemed to narrow to the space between us. But his voice, when it came, was controlled as ever. Because leaving you out there while I waited for certainty would have been the greater risk. I searched his face for the angle, the manipulation, the part where this all became strategy instead of concern. I found intelligence, restraint, fatigue tucked deep behind composure. What I did not find was indifference. You barely know me, I whispered. That has nothing to do with whether I protect you. The words hit harder than they should have. Maybe because they were not romantic. Not dramatic. Just absolute. Outside the room, footsteps moved quickly down the hallway. Then a knock sounded at the door, sharper this time. Roman turned at once. His whole body changed in a single breath, every line of him going alert, without a single wasted motion. What is it? He asked. A man's voice came through the wood, tight and controlled. Sir, there is activity at Miss Bennett's apartment building. The cameras show someone tried her door 10 minutes ago. Everything inside me dropped cold. Roman looked back at me, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet enough to make the fear worse. Claire, he said, you are not going home tonight. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. The room did not move, but everything inside me did. My apartment. My narrow hallway with the chipped baseboard. The second-hand lamp by the couch. The grocery receipt still sitting on my kitchen counter. Someone had been there. Or close enough to try. And suddenly, every ordinary thing I owned felt exposed. As if the life I had built out of paycheck math and stubbornness had been reduced to a location on someone else's screen. Roman crossed to the door and opened it before I could say anything. A man in a dark suit stood. Outside, posture straight, expression disciplined in the way everyone in this house seemed to be disciplined. Roman listened for less than 10 seconds, asked 2 quiet questions, and then dismissed him with a glance. No wasted motion. No repeated instructions. When the door closed again, I realized I was gripping the edge of the dresser hard enough to hurt my fingers. What does tried mean? I asked. My voice sounded thin, unfamiliar. Exactly what it sounds like. Roman looked at me for a beat, then shook his head once. No forced entry. No damage. Someone approached your door, checked the lock, and left when the hallway camera shifted. That does not make it better. No, he said. It makes it early. I stared at him. Early. If they wanted a scene, you would already have one. This was a test. He said it with such controlled certainty that fear slid lower into my stomach and settled there. A test. Like I was not a person with rent due and sore feet and a favorite mug at home. Like I was a line someone had probed to see whether it was guarded. I wrapped my arms around myself, the borrowed sweater suddenly too soft for the conversation happening inside it. Who are they? Roman walked to the fireplace and rested one hand on the marble mantel, not leaning, just pausing there like even stillness in him was deliberate. That is what I am confirming. You do not know? I know enough to take this seriously. That is not reassuring. It is not meant to be. I let out one unsteady breath. You really do not believe in making people feel better, do you? His gaze found mine. I believe in keeping them alive long enough to feel better later. The answer should have sounded cold. Instead it landed with a strange, painful kind of care, stripped of softness, but not of intention. That was the problem with Roman. He did not offer comfort the way normal people did. He offered protection like a wall being built in real time, stone by stone, even while you were still deciding whether to trust the architect. I moved toward the armchair near the bed and sat because my knees no longer felt entirely reliable. The room was warm, but my hands were cold again. Roman noticed. Of course he did. He crossed away. Side table, poured tea from a silver pot I had not even registered was there, and handed me the cup. Elena thought ahead, he said. I took it carefully. Steam curled against my face, carrying the scent of chamomile and something faintly citrus. Does anyone in this house ever do anything without anticipating the next 3 disasters? Very rarely. That sounds exhausting too. A pause. Then, quietly, it is. I looked up at him. Something in his voice had changed. Only a fraction, but enough to reveal the cost beneath the control. For the first time all night, he looked less like a legend and more like a man who had not slept properly in a long time. Not weak. Never that. Just burdened in a way expensive rooms and tailored clothes could not hide forever. Does Sophia know about my apartment? I asked. No, good. The word came out faster than I expected. Roman noticed that too. You are worried she will blame herself. Should she not? His expression sharpened. No. She thanked me for seeing her, Roman. His name left my mouth before I could stop it. The air changed slightly after that, thinner and more personal somehow. I pressed on before I could think about why. A child does not say that unless she is already carrying things she should never have had to carry. If this happened because I looked at her, then yes, maybe she will blame herself. Roman was silent long enough that I thought he might refuse to answer. Then he said, she blames herself when adults around her become careful. I held the warm cup tighter. That is heartbreaking. That is reality. That is not the same thing. His eyes settled on mine, dark and steady and suddenly less guarded than before. In my life, he said, they often are. The room went quiet again. Not empty. Full. There was too much in that sentence, too much I did not know, too much I could only feel at the edges. I understood then that Roman did not speak in long confessions because he did not have to. He dropped truths the way other people dropped keys, heavy enough to tell you there were locked rooms behind them whether he opened them or not. I took a sip of tea. It steadied me more than I wanted to admit. What happens tomorrow? I asked. By morning, your apartment will be secured. Your landlord will be told there was a plumbing issue that required private access, and your name will be removed from 2 public record sites before breakfast. I blinked at him. You can do that? Yes. Should I even ask how? No, despite myself. A breath that almost sounded like a laugh slipped out of me. Roman watched me carefully, as if the sound had surprised him too. Then his expression shifted, focus sharpening towards something just beyond the door. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out my phone, and placed it in my hand. You may send one message, he said. To who? Someone who will not post, panic, or ask questions in writing. I looked at the screen, dark and familiar, and suddenly precious. That is a very specific category. My life requires specific categories. I turned the phone over in my palm, but did not unlock it yet. And if I want to text no one, then do not. He started for the door, then stopped with his hand on the knob. There will be a guard outside tonight, he said. That is not to contain you. It is to make sure no one reaches this room before I do. My pulse stumbled once at the quiet certainty of that. And where will you be? I asked before I could stop myself. Roman looked back over his shoulder, all shadow and composure, and that impossible calm that somehow felt more dangerous now that I had seen the man beneath it. Making sure, he said, that the next person who tries your door understands it belongs to my protection now. I did not send a message. I unlocked my phone, stared at the screen glowing in my hand, and realized there was no one I could text without dragging them into a version of the truth they could not survive knowing. My manager would panic. My landlord would ask questions I could not answer. The one friend I trusted enough to call after midnight would show up in sweatpants and loyalty and get herself turned away by men in dark suits before she made it past the gate. So I locked the phone again and set it on the nightstand beside the untouched plate of fruit. Roman looked at it, then at me. No one, he asked. No one. Useful, I said. He gave a single nod, as if practicality mattered more to him than sentiment, then opened the door and stepped into the hallway. I heard the low murmur of a man stationed outside, the soft answer Roman gave, and then silence settled over the room again. Not peaceful silence, guarded silence. The kind that reminds you safety and freedom are not always the same thing. I sat for a long time in the armchair by the bed, my hands wrapped around the teacup long after the tea had cooled. The rain had eased outside, not stopped, just softened into a fine whisper against the windows and stone. Every once in a while, footsteps moved somewhere down the hall. Once, I heard Sophia laugh faintly in the distance, followed by Elena's quieter voice, and the sound was so normal it almost hurt. That was the strange thing about this house. It held danger and tenderness in the same breath. Men with earpieces downstairs. A child in pale pajamas upstairs. Expensive artwork on the walls. Locked doors. Chamomile tea. It did not make sense, and maybe that was why sleep refused to come. Around 1 a.m, there was another knock at the door. I stiffened instantly. Miss Bennet. Elena called softly from the other side. May I come in? I let out a breath and crossed the room to open it myself. She stood there holding a folded blanket and a small cream-colored notebook. I thought you might not sleep, she said. That obvious? Only to women who have seen fear dressed up as composure. The sentence caught me off guard. Elena stepped inside when I moved aside, placing the blanket at the foot of the bed and the notebook on the nightstand. Sophia uses this room sometimes when storms are loud, she said. There are pencils in the drawer. Drawing helps her. I looked at the little notebook, then back at Elena. Why are you being kind to me? Her expression changed. Not much, but enough. Because kindness in houses like this must be done on purpose, or it disappears. I stood very still after she said that. It sounded like something learned the hard way. Do you trust him? I asked before I could decide whether it was fair. Elena did not pretend not to know who I meant. She smoothed one hand over the blanket, then met my eyes. I trust that if Roman DeLuca says no one will touch you, then no one will. That is not the same as trusting him. No, she said gently. It is more specific. Then she left me with that answer, which felt exactly like something this household would consider enough. I did not draw. I tried. I opened the notebook, stared at the blank first page, and found that my mind could only sketch fragments. A hand against tinted glass. Rain on Roman's coat. Sophia's eyes when she said thank you for seeing me. The exact sound of a lock turning from the outside. I closed the notebook and lay down fully dressed in the borrowed sweater, staring at the carved ceiling until exhaustion finally dragged me under. I do not know how long I slept. Maybe an hour. Maybe less. I woke to the sound of voices outside my door. Not loud. Just urgent enough to slice through sleep like light under a curtain. I sat up immediately, pulse racing, and looked at the clock on the nightstand. 2:12. The hallway beyond the door carried that particular stillness that only exists when something is wrong and everyone is trying not to let it spread. I slid out of bed and crossed the room barefoot, the rug soft under my feet. I did not open the door. I only listened. One of the men outside said, "The vehicle is still parked across the street." Another voice answered, "No movement in the last 10 minutes. Then Roman. Low. Controlled. Impossible to mistake. That does not mean absence. It means patience. A chill moved through me so fast it felt like I had stepped back into the rain. Across the street. From this house. I looked toward the curtains before I could stop myself, then remembered his warning and stayed where I was. My heart hammered harder. I knew enough by now to understand what that meant. Whoever had tried my apartment was not simply curious. This had followed me here. The door opened before I touched it. Roman stepped in, already looking at me as if he had known I would be awake the second the hallway changed. He had his coat back on. His expression was calm, but there was a different edge to him now, something colder and more final. "Get your shoes on," he said. "Why?" I asked. His eyes flicked once toward the covered windows, then returned to mine. "Because whoever came looking for your apartment has now found my house, and I would rather move you before they learn which room is yours." My body moved before my thoughts did. I grabbed the sneakers Elena had somehow replaced during the night, still clean and too new to feel like mine, and shoved my feet into them without socks. The laces dragged against the rug as I tied them with shaking fingers. Roman did not rush me. That was somehow worse. He stood near the door in his dark coat, one hand at his side, his posture steady in that unnerving way of his, as if the whole house might be shifting beneath us, and he would still be the only thing in it that did not sway. "Are we leaving the house?" I asked. "Yes." "Through the front?" "No, where are we going?" "Somewhere they will not predict first." I stood up too fast and had to catch myself on the bedpost. Roman noticed, of course. He crossed the room in 2 steps and steadied my elbow with one hand. The contact was brief, firm, and careful, like he was used to handling unstable moments without making them feel fragile. "Can you walk?" he asked. "Yes." "Can you stay calm for 3 minutes?" "Probably not." The corner of his mouth shifted, almost a smile, and gone before it settled. "Do it anyway." He let go and opened the door. The guard outside stepped back immediately. The hallway looked the same as it had hours ago, soft gold light, quiet rugs, polished wood, but the feeling was different now. Tighter. Men stood at both ends of the corridor, speaking into earpieces, moving only when necessary. Nothing chaotic. That was what terrified me. Panic would have looked human. This looked practiced. Roman guided me toward the back staircase instead of the main one, his hand hovering near the small of my back without touching. I could feel it there anyway, the shape of protection, not yet contact. We moved quickly but not loudly. Down 1 floor, past a sitting room lit by a single lamp, through a narrow service hallway where the air smelled faintly of starch and coffee. Somewhere farther inside the house, a child cried out once in her sleep, and was soothed almost immediately by a woman's low voice. "Sophia." The sound cut through me. "She is staying here?" I asked under my breath. "Yes," Roman said. "Elena is with her." "Should she be moved too?" "Not unless I say so." The confidence in his answer should have calmed me. Instead, it made me realize how much of this house depended on his judgment alone. We reached a steel-gray door at the end of the hall. One of the men waiting there unlocked it with a key card and stepped aside. Beyond it was a covered garage lit by strips of white overhead light. 3 vehicles waited inside, all dark, polished, and silent like patient animals. Rain ticked softly somewhere outside beyond the concrete walls. Roman opened the rear door of the middle SUV and motioned for me to get in. I stopped short. "That is the same kind of car. That is the point." I thought we were avoiding predictability. He looked at me steadily. Sometimes the best way to hide movement is to let people think they already understand it. I slid into the seat because the alternative was standing in a garage arguing strategy with a man whose entire life was strategy. The interior smelled like leather and cold night air. Roman got in beside me a moment later, and the doors closed with that same sealed, expensive quiet I was beginning to associate with being removed from my own life. The driver pulled out before I could ask anything else. We moved through a gated tunnel beneath the house and emerged onto a side street I had never noticed before, 1 block over from the front entrance. Clever. Of course it was. For the first few minutes, no one spoke. The city at 2 in the morning looked unreal, all empty intersections and amber streetlights reflected in black pavement. A bakery truck rolled through a red light, with no cross traffic to stop it. An elevated train rattled in the distance like weather made of steel. Somewhere along the river, fog had begun to gather in pale strips above the water. Roman looked out the window, one hand resting near his knee, his profile cut sharp by passing light. I wondered if he was counting again. Cars. Seconds. Risks. Exit routes. Were you always like this? I asked. He turned his head slightly. Like what? Like you have already seen the next 10 minutes before anyone else gets to the next one. His gaze held mine for a moment. No, so what changed? Enough. I let out a breath through my nose. You really are impossible. That is one opinion. It is the correct one. This time the almost smile lasted a fraction longer. Not amusement exactly. Recognition. As if he had forgotten what it sounded like when someone spoke to him without calculation. The thought unsettled me more than I wanted it to. Do you ever answer a question directly? I asked. When the answer is useful. And when it is not. I prefer silence. That is a very convenient philosophy for a man with a mansion and a security team. He looked at me then, really looked, and the city lights moving across his face did something dangerous to the moment. They made him seem less like a figure built from rumor and more like a man sitting close enough for me to notice the fatigue beneath the control. Claire, he said quietly, there are things about my life that are safer not to understand all at once. I should have let it go. I should have leaned back, stayed quiet, remembered the line between curiosity and survival. Instead, I asked the one thing that had been growing sharper in me since he first brought me into his car. Then answer this one directly. Why am I still with you? Roman did not respond immediately. Outside, the SUV crossed a bridge, the river below us dark as ink, city lights broken across its surface. The silence stretched long enough to matter. Then he said, because the moment someone tried your apartment door, this stopped being about chance. I waited. And because you are safer where I can see you. The honesty of it landed before I could defend against it. Not because it was tender, because it was not. It was plain, controlled, dangerous in its certainty. I turned toward the window, so he would not see the confusion on my face, but the glass only gave me back a faint reflection of both of us sitting too close in the dim interior. My borrowed sweater, his dark coat, my fear, his stillness, two lives that should never have crossed, now moving through the sleeping city in the same direction. The SUV slowed. Beneath the shadow of an old brick building near the waterfront, its windows dark from the street and unmarked by any sign. No guards visible, no lights in the lobby, nothing that would draw attention. Roman touched the door handle, but did not open it yet. He looked at me once, his expression unreadable again, the softness from the car already folded away behind command. From this point on, he said, you do exactly what I say, exactly when I say it. And if I do not, his eyes held mine, calm and absolute. Then the people who followed you tonight will learn I was right to worry about you. Then I guess I do exactly what you say, I murmured, though my voice sounded steadier than I felt. Roman held my gaze for one more second, as if measuring whether I understood the weight of what I had just agreed to, then opened the door and stepped out into the cold. I followed him onto the sidewalk, the air near the waterfront sharper than uptown, carrying the smell of rain, river water, and old brick that had held 100 winters. The building in front of us looked abandoned in the kind of expensive way only powerful people can manage. No sign, no doorman, just dark windows, black steel trim, and a narrow recessed entrance half hidden by the shadow of the upper floors. Roman placed one hand lightly at my back, guiding me toward the door, and the contact was brief enough to be practical, but certain enough to erase any doubt that I was under his protection now. Inside, the lobby was dim and silent, all poured concrete, brushed steel, and a single lamp burning low beside a long wooden console. A man rose from a chair in the corner the moment Roman entered. He was older than the others I had seen, maybe late 50s, silver at the temples, posture straight as a blade. Everything is ready, he said. Roman nodded once. Any movement? Nothing near the rear alley. One vehicle passed twice on Harbor Street, then continued east. Roman's expression did not change. Good. Good. The word unsettled me more than if he had sounded alarmed. Good meant the pattern had matched his expectations. Good meant he was already thinking 3 moves beyond whatever I could see. The older man glanced at me then, not rudely, not curiously, just with the quick assessment of someone cataloging a new variable. Miss Bennett, he said with a small inclination of his head. I am Victor. Of course you are, I said before I could stop myself. He blinked once. Roman almost smiled. Victor has been with my family longer than I have been alive, Roman said as he led me toward a private elevator at the back of the lobby. He is one of the few people I trust without condition. Victor pressed a key into Roman's hand. Third floor only. The rest remains dark. Roman gave a slight nod, and we stepped into the elevator alone. As the doors closed, I leaned back against the wall and let out a breath. You have backup locations by the river? I asked. I have places that do not officially belong to me, Roman said. That sounds legal. It sounds useful. The elevator rose smoothly, and I watched the floor numbers light one by one. My reflection in the brushed metal wall looked pale and unfamiliar, hair still slightly damp, sweater too soft, eyes too wide. Roman's reflection beside mine looked exactly like him. Controlled, collected, a man who could stand in the center of danger and somehow make stillness look like a weapon. When the doors opened, we stepped into a loft that felt more hidden than luxurious. Wide plank floors, exposed brick, tall factory windows covered by motorized steel shutters, low lamps casting warm pools of light across a long sectional sofa, a kitchen with matte black counters, and shelves lined with books instead of photographs. Everything about the space was beautiful, but none of it invited carelessness. It looked like a place designed for thinking, not living. This is yours too? I asked. Roman removed his coat and draped it over the back of a chair. Occasionally. That means yes. He looked at me. That means sometimes the truth is clearer when you stop decorating it. I folded my arms. Do you always answer honesty with philosophy? Only when I am tired. That answer landed differently. More human. More dangerous for that very reason. I walked slowly into the room, taking in the closed shutters, the untouched glassware in the kitchen, the absolute lack of personal clutter. No family pictures, I said. No art that looks sentimental. No sign anyone actually stays here. Roman loosened his cuffs, then rolled his sleeves once with the same neat precision I had noticed before. It is not meant to be sentimental. Then what is it meant to be? Secure. There it was again. That word, heavy and practical and never warm enough to soften anything. I moved closer to one of the shuttered windows, not touching it, only listening. The rain had thinned to a mist, and from somewhere below came the muted horn of a tugboat on the river, long and low, like the night itself was warning someone to turn back. Am I supposed to sleep here too? I asked. For a few hours. And then, Roman crossed to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and handed it to me. At sunrise, I will know more. You say that like daylight solves things. It clarifies them. I took the glass, my fingers brushing his for the briefest second. Warm skin. Steady hand. Ridiculous that something so small could feel louder than the entire room. I drew back first. And if what daylight clarifies is bad? Roman did not answer immediately. He stood close enough that I could see the tiredness at the edges now, tucked beneath discipline and good posture and the weight of everything he never said outright. Then I adjust, he said at last. That is what I do. I believed him. That was the problem. I believed he would move heaven, earth, and every locked door between them if he decided something was under his protection. The question was no longer whether he could keep me safe. It was what safety would cost once it belonged to a man like him. A soft vibration broke the silence. Roman pulled his phone from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and every line of him changed. Not panic. Never panic. Just a deeper stillness, the kind that means a thought has landed exactly where it should not. What is it? I asked. He looked up at me, expression unreadable. The person in the car outside my house was not watching the house. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. They were waiting for us to leave it. The room seemed to tilt around that sentence. I stared at him, cold moving through me all over again. So they knew you would move me. No, he said quietly. They hoped I would. What does that mean? Roman took one step toward me, his voice low enough that it felt carved from the same dark quiet as the room around us. It means, Claire, that tonight was never about reaching your apartment. It was about learning how far I would go to protect you. For a moment, I could not feel the floor beneath me. The loft stayed exactly as it was, warm light on brick, shutters sealed over the windows, the river sounding far away beneath the walls. But something in the room had shifted so completely that it felt as if the air itself had learned my name. They were not watching the house. They were waiting for us to leave it. I stared at Roman, trying to fit that sentence into anything that still resembled normal logic, and failing. So they wanted to measure you, I said at last. Not me. Roman's eyes stayed on mine. At first, perhaps. And now. Now they know you change my decisions. The honesty of it landed like cold water. No softness. No hesitation. Just the kind of truth that refused to dress itself up before entering a room. I looked away first, turning toward the steel shutters over the windows because there was nowhere else to put the sudden heat in my face. It made no sense. We had known each other for hours. A single night. A rainstorm. A signal. A car door opening onto the wrong life. Yet the facts were arranged around me whether I liked them or not. Someone had watched my apartment. Someone had waited outside his house. Someone had predicted he would move me. That was not random anymore. That was attention. Roman's phone vibrated again. He read the message without expression, then set the device face down on the kitchen counter. Tell me exactly what is happening, I said. No more pieces. No more selective truth. I am tired of being informed 1 inch at a time. He was quiet for a beat. Then he nodded once, as if I had asked for something reasonable, and he was deciding whether the night had earned it. Someone close to one of my business routes has been feeding timing information to an outside group for the last month, he said. We knew there was a leak. We did not know how they intended to use it. Until the image of you appeared near my car, and they realized an unplanned variable had entered the pattern. I folded my arms tighter, as if I could hold myself together by pressure alone. You make people sound like weather reports. That is because weather reports do not lie about storms. I almost argued, then stopped because some part of me was beginning to understand that this was how he survived. He translated chaos into systems, fear into logistics, betrayal into timing, routes, windows, exits. It did not make him cold. It made him functional in places where colder men probably broke. And what do they think I am? I asked. Roman crossed the room slowly, stopping an arm's length away. That depends on what they saw in my response, which was immediate relocation, increased security, direct involvement. My throat tightened. So they think I matter. Yes. He said it so simply that it became impossible to pretend otherwise. I turned from him and walked a few steps toward the center of the loft, then back again, all restless energy and nowhere to put it. The room was beautiful in a way that only made me angrier, because fear should not happen in places with designer lamps and clean countertops and water glasses set down without fingerprints. Do you know what is insane about this? I asked. Roman watched me without interrupting. Yesterday, I was worrying about whether my electricity bill would clear before the weekend. I was counting tip money in a diner apron. I was eating fries out of a wet paper bag. And now I am standing in some hidden apartment by the river being told that strangers are tracking me because I looked at the wrong car for 38 seconds. 38 was long enough, he said. That is not the comforting line you think it is. It was not intended to be. I stopped pacing and laughed once, tired and sharp. Do you ever hear yourself? A pause. Then, unexpectedly, more than I would like. The answer caught me off guard. It was small, almost nothing, but it revealed a crack I had not seen before. Self-awareness. Fatigue. The burden of carrying a voice that apparently shaped entire nights, and still having to live inside it. I looked at him more carefully then. The rolled sleeves. The loosened cuffs. The slight tension at the base of his throat that only showed when he was holding too many thoughts at once. He had looked untouchable on the sidewalk, in the car, in the mansion hallway. But here, under softer light with no audience except me, I could finally see the cost of being the man everyone else depended on to stay still. When was the last time you slept? I asked. Roman's expression changed by a fraction, enough to tell me I had asked something no one around him usually bothered to. That is not relevant. That is not an answer. It is the one you are getting. Roman. His name felt different now. Less accidental. More like stepping onto a stone in deep water and realizing it held. He looked at me, and for one strange second the whole room narrowed to the line between our eyes. I am asking because you look tired, I said more quietly, and because men who think they can protect everyone usually forget they are still human. He did not move. That sounds like experience. It sounds like having watched my mother work double shifts until she forgot what week it was. Something flickered in his face then. Recognition, maybe. Or memory. You compare me to a woman working hospital admissions, he said. I compare you to someone carrying too much while pretending it is fine. Silence. Not empty this time. Charged. He glanced down once, then back at me, as if the honesty in the room had become harder to manage than any threat outside. 3 hours, he said. I blinked. What? That is how long I slept yesterday. It should not have mattered. It did. Not because I pitied him. Roman DeLuca was not a man built to invite pity, but because truth offered plainly was intimate in its own dangerous way. I nodded slowly. That is not enough. No, he said. It is not. My phone, still lying on the counter where I had set it down earlier, lit up with an incoming call. Unknown number. The screen glowed in the dim loft like a warning flare. I stared at it. Roman did too. Neither of us moved right away. Then it stopped. One missed call. Silence. A second later, a message appeared. No name. No picture. Just a single line of text on the screen. We know he moved you. Roman reached the phone before I did. His expression did not change, but the stillness around him turned absolute. He looked at the message once, then at me, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter than fear and far more dangerous. Claire, he said, from this moment on, you do not answer any number you do not recognize, and you do not spend 1 second alone unless I say it is safe. The message stayed on the screen for less than a second before Roman turned the phone face down on the counter, but that second was enough. Enough for the words to burn themselves into me. We know he moved you. Not maybe. Not we think. No. The loft suddenly felt too still, too deliberate, like every lamp and shutter and polished surface had become part of a stage someone else was watching from the dark. I wrapped my arms around myself and tried to keep my breathing even, but fear had changed shape now. It was no longer the sharp panic of being taken somewhere unfamiliar. It was colder than that. Smarter. A fear with patience. Roman picked up his own phone and made one call. He did not raise his voice. He never needed to. Lock every channel attached to her number, he said. New device at sunrise. Pull traffic cameras from Harbor, Mercer, and all adjacent cross streets for the last 90 minutes. I want the sequence, not the summary. He listened, said nothing for a moment, then added, no. Do not contact the house again unless Sophia is involved. The way he said her name told me everything. There were lines in his world, and whatever else happened tonight, his niece remained one of the few things he would not allow anyone to turn into leverage. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his coat pocket. Sit down, he said. I am fine standing. Claire. Just my name again. Low. Precise. The kind of command that made refusal feel less like rebellion and more like waste. I sat on the edge of the sofa because my legs had started to feel unreliable anyway. Roman remained standing for a moment, looking toward the shuttered windows as if he could see through steel and brick and rain into the intentions of people 3 streets away. Then he turned back to me. Listen carefully, he said. The message was not sent to frighten you. That is a bold strategy, because it worked. Fear was a side effect. The goal was to establish reach. I stared at him. You really do translate horror into business terms. I translated into useful terms. He crossed to the kitchen, poured fresh water into a glass, and set it down on the table in front of me. They want us to know they can touch your phone, your apartment, and any place I move you if I do it in predictable ways. Us, I repeated quietly. Roman's eyes met mine. Yes. Something about that small word landed harder than the threat. Not because it was comforting, because it was inclusion spoken like fact. I was inside this now, whether I had chosen it or not, and he was not pretending otherwise. So what happens next? I asked. He leaned one hand against the back of the chair across from me, the other resting loosely at his side. All his stillness gathered into focus. Next, I stop reacting and start setting the pace. That sounds ominous. It is effective. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling again, faintly, the kind of shake that comes after too much adrenaline and not enough sleep. Roman noticed. Of course he did. He always noticed. Drink the water, he said. That is not going to fix this. No, but dehydration will make you think worse. I picked up the glass and took a sip because I was too tired to argue with practical advice disguised as control. The water was cold and clean. Across the room, Roman finally took off his coat and laid it over the arm of a chair, but he did not sit. He looked even more dangerous without it, sleeves rolled, posture easy in a way that suggested he did not need formal armor to command a room. Do they know my name? I asked. Probably. My job? Possibly. My friends? Not yet. He answered without hesitation, which meant he had already considered each category and built walls around them in his head. And if they get that far? Roman's gaze sharpened. They will not. You cannot promise that. I can promise my response if they try. The room went quiet after that. Outside, somewhere beyond the sealed shutters, a horn sounded on the river. Long, low, lonely. I realized then that the night was beginning to thin at the edges. Not morning yet, but moving toward it. The deepest dark had passed, and somehow that made everything feel more fragile, not less. Nights can hold impossible things because they feel temporary. Dawn asks what survives them. Why me? I asked softly. Roman did not answer right away. He stepped closer instead, stopping in front of me with enough distance to stay careful and enough presence to make the air feel altered. Because you became visible beside me, he said. Because I responded. Because people who cannot reach the center often test the edge. I looked up at him. So I am the edge. Something in his expression changed then, almost imperceptibly. No, he said. You were the edge. Tonight they confirmed you are inside the line. I should have pulled back from that sentence. I should have treated it like every other dangerous thing in this room. Instead, I held his gaze and felt the weight of it settle somewhere too deep to name. Inside the line. Not safe. Not simple. But chosen. Protected. Claimed in the only language a man like Roman seemed to trust. My phone lit up again on the counter. This time it was not a message. It was a photograph. Roman saw it the same second I did. A grainy shot taken from across the street outside the diner where I worked, time-stamped from earlier that evening before my shift had even ended. Me in my blue uniform, carrying a tray through the front window, completely unaware. My stomach dropped so hard it hurt. They had me before the rain, I whispered. Roman picked up the phone, looked at the image once, and all softness vanished from his face like a door closing. No, he said, voice quieter than before and infinitely more severe. They had your location before the rain. You became important the second you made me stop the car. He slipped the phone into his pocket and looked down at me with a calm, so complete it became its own kind of force. Which means whoever planned this did not predict you, he said. They predicted me. Roman's words settled into the loft like the last piece of a lock clicking into place. They predicted me. I sat very still on the edge of the sofa, feeling the shape of that sentence move through everything that had happened. Since the rain, the car, my apartment, the house, the riverfront loft, none of it had begun with me. I had not been chosen first. I had only become visible when Roman DeLuca changed direction for 38 seconds and let the wrong people see it. So I was never the target, I said quietly. Roman stood in front of me, sleeves rolled, expression calm in that dangerous way only he seemed capable of. Not originally. That is supposed to make me feel better? No, he held my gaze. It is supposed to make you understand that this was planned by someone who knows how I respond. The river sounded faintly beyond the sealed shutters, a low restless current pressing through brick and steel and distance. Dawn had not arrived yet, but the dark no longer felt endless. It felt narrowed, focused, as if the night had spent hours stripping away everything unimportant and left us with only the truths neither of us could avoid. Someone close to you, I said. Close enough to study patterns, Roman answered. Close enough to know what would make you stop. His eyes did not leave mine. The meaning of that settled between us with unnerving clarity. I looked down at my hands. They were finally still. Not because I felt safe. Because fear had passed some invisible threshold and become something heavier than panic. Awareness, maybe. The understanding that once a life is seen by the wrong people, innocence does not protect it anymore. I should never have raised my hand. I whispered. The moment the words left me, I hated them. Not because they were false, but because they sounded like surrender. Roman's expression changed, not by much, just enough for me to feel it. Do not do that. I looked up. Do what? Turn decency into guilt. His voice was low, precise, leaving no room for argument. You saw a frightened child and responded. The fault belongs to the people who built danger around that moment, not to the person who acted like a human being. Something in my chest tightened painfully. No one had said it that clearly all night. Not Elena. Not me. Not even the frightened part of my own mind that kept trying to rewrite the evening into a mistake I could have avoided if I had just looked away. Roman took one step closer, enough that his presence changed the air again. If you regret anything, he said, regret that this city teaches good people to hesitate before helping. I could not speak for a second. The room was too quiet, his words too direct, the hour too thin and honest for lies. You make it very difficult to remember I am supposed to be afraid of you, I said at last. A shadow of something almost warm touched his face. That suggests you have not been listening carefully. No, I said, surprising even myself with the steadiness in my voice. It suggests maybe everyone else only knows the part of you that makes sense from a distance. Silence. It stretched, but it did not break. Roman looked at me as if I had said something he had not allowed himself to hear in a long time. Then his phone vibrated again. He answered immediately, turning slightly away but not leaving the room. Yes. A pause. How many? Another pause. Do not move until Victor confirms the angle. He listened longer this time, and when he finally ended the call, the stillness in him had become absolute. What happened? I asked. Roman slipped the phone back into his pocket. Victor's team found the vehicle that waited outside the house. And it was abandoned 2 blocks east of Harbor Street. Cold moved through me again. Abandoned by who? That is what they are determining. I stood because sitting suddenly felt impossible. So whoever did this is just gone. For the moment. That is not good enough. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I was too tired to soften them. You keep telling me things in measured tones like control itself is an answer, but I need you to say this plainly. Am I ever getting my life back? Roman looked at me for a long moment, and for the first time since I had met him, he did not answer quickly. He walked to the nearest shuttered window, resting one hand against the cold metal slat without opening it. The dim light caught the line of his profile, the tension in his jaw, the fatigue he carried too well to show unless you knew where to look. Not the same life, he said at last. Honest. Brutal. Clean. The truth hit harder because he did not soften it. I swallowed against the pressure suddenly rising in my throat. That is a terrible thing to say to someone. It would be a worse thing to let you believe otherwise. I stared at him, anger and fear and exhaustion knotting together until I could barely tell one from the next. Then what exactly are you offering me, Roman? He turned from the window and crossed the room slowly, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my head back to hold his gaze. No crowd. No bodyguards. No audience to perform for. Just the man the city feared and the woman who had interrupted his night with one small act of mercy. The truth, he said. Protection. Time to decide who you become after this. My breath caught. You say that like I have a choice. You do. Do I? He held my gaze, dark eyes steady, voice quieter now. You can resent me. You can distrust me. You can hate every door I close and every order I give. But as long as this reaches for you, I will stand between it and your life. That part is not negotiable. There it was again. Not romance. Not softness. Something more frightening because it was firmer than either. A vow spoken without flourish. A boundary drawn in a language built from certainty. Outside, somewhere below, a vehicle door shut. Then footsteps in the hall beyond the loft. Victor's measured knock came a second later. Roman did not look away from me when he said, "Come in." Victor entered with the same controlled composure as before, but this time there was something new beneath it. Urgency. We have identification on the owner of the abandoned vehicle, he said. It traces back to a shell company connected to the Mercer account. Roman's face did not change, but the room seemed to sharpen around him. I thought that account was dormant, he said. So did everyone else, Victor replied. A beat of silence followed. Then Roman asked the question that made my pulse stumble all over again. And the photograph from the diner? Victor nodded once. Confirmed. It was taken by someone already in place before Miss Bennett left work. I looked from one man to the other, my heart knocking too hard against my ribs. What does that mean? Victor glanced at Roman before answering. It means, Miss Bennett, that you were not pulled into a problem by chance. Roman's gaze returned fully to mine, unreadable now except for the force of his attention. It means, he said quietly, someone knew exactly what kind of woman would make me stop.